Welcome, Tahoe Regional Young Professionals. On behalf of our board, our volunteers, our organization, we welcome you to this edition of our Tahoe Town Hall series on Measure C. This is an endeavor on behalf of our civic engagement branch of the organization that's brought to you by local volunteers and designed to get our community informed and educated and participating in ongoing local conversations. So at the beginning of all of these events, we just want to make sure that we point out that TRYP is a politically neutral organization. You will see here that none of our board members are on this panel of wonderful participants. We thank you for your time. So the statements made here, the opinions expressed by our panelists are not necessarily representative of our organization and do not reflect a statement made by TRYP. A couple other housekeeping items. We want to thank our sponsors, for which we could not be doing this without their support. We want to thank our partners at the Tahoe Chamber. We want to thank our partners at the South Tahoe Chamber, and we also want to thank the Ski Bum family for contributing to the live stream tonight by Tahoe Production House. And finally, we want to thank this wonderful venue that we're here in tonight, Tahoe Beach Retreat, this wonderful conference room. The view is kind of distracting, so we have you facing this way. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our moderator tonight. Just going to lay down some of the ground rules for how we facilitate our town hall events. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce the TRYP Executive Director, Devin Middlebrook.
Thank you, Jenna. I'll take it. So thank you so much, Jenna. So like she said, I'll introduce some ground rules tonight. So we have, for the audience members, when a question arises, we have cue cards that are lovely assistants on the outsides of the room. We'll be passing around with pens, so if you have a question that you have now or arises during the event, raise your hand. They'll get you a card and a pen. You can write down your question. It helps us if you write down the name of the panelist that you would like to address it. If it's a general question, you can just leave that part blank. But write a nice, concise question so we could bring that together. I also want to say that our panel tonight, we will be introducing our panelists, throwing them a question we have pre-canned, pre-thought of for them to answer, and then we'll open it up for audience Q&A. And I also want to just say, keep it respectful. We're all here tonight. All of our town halls have been very civil, and we're here to get both sides of the story out, let people make their own opinion about the issue that we're talking about tonight, Measure C. And I think it'll be a very informative night. So without further ado, we'll dive in and I'll introduce our esteemed panelists for the night. Starting from my side, working down. Bruce Grego, who's a former city council member and current citizen of South Lake Tahoe. Jim Marino, who is an assistant director for the city of South Lake Tahoe. Steve Knight, who is general manager for Cardinale Way Toyota here in town. Wendy David, Mayor Pro Tem for the City of South Lake Tahoe. Steve Teixeira, CEO for the Tahoe Chamber. And Kenny Kurzweiler, the man who needs no introduction. So we'll dive right in, and I want to throw this first to Wendy. Wendy, can you just explain a little bit about Measure C, what it is, what it would mean for the community?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone, and I'm excited to be here tonight because I really do enjoy talking about Measure C and what it will bring to our community. I'm sure we're all here tonight for somewhat the same reason. We care about our community. We live here. We are fortunate enough to live in a beautiful community that has a gorgeous lake and a beautiful scene right out our window that I do get to look at. And it's just, we're lucky. We're fortunate. We have seen a lot of improvement in our community lately. We've seen Highway 50 corridor be restored and rebuilt. And we have seen economic development. And we have seen a lot of other things that have happened that make us feel better about where we live. But one of the things that we really need to have improved is our roads. And my question that was given to me early, one of them was, why now? Why now are you putting forward a road tax? We are here at this point because we desperately need a sustained and lawfully restricted road repair budget in order to repair our neglected and deteriorating roads, and then be able to sustain the quality of our roads in the decades to come. How did we get here? There has never been a sustained and restricted funding source. Funding for roads is discretionary, and I can say that 50% of the funding allocated to roads over the last 23 years has been allocated and spent in the last 5 years. City budgets fluctuate from year to year, just as our personal budgets fluctuate. Our roads need more repair than our budget can produce annually. The why. The city is putting forward a measure is to address this imperative need. The city of Placerville put forward the same 1/2 cent sales tax earlier this year and was successful, and the city of Truckee just passed their second tax after having a 10-year tax that the residents re-upped again because they saw the difference it was making. Having a sustained funding source will allow us to leverage our funding with other entities doing road work and to enter into long-term contracts at better rates, and to have a real road repair plan for the future. In May of 2017, we asked our residents in a survey, what would you like to see as your priority for roads repair? The number one, and you won't be surprised, the number one top priority was pothole repair. And the number two, the second priority was to upgrade our existing roads to modern standards. We listened. Measure C is a 1/2 cent sales tax that is by law forever restricted to road improvement only. Measure C is a special tax, so it needs a 66.7% of yes votes to pass. And that's what then is, we're able to restrict that for the rest of its life. It has a 15-year sunset. We believe that you residents must have that, and we want that. So at the end of 15 years, we can say, did we do a good job? Is this something that you want to have again, or is it something you don't? We also put in two other things with our tourist. We put in also the Roads Management Authority, and that will look at every single project and will be part of the planning and part of the road projects going forward. On the other end, we put in a Citizens Advisory Committee, and the Citizens Advisory Committee will once a year be able to look at our audits, and will put forward a report that goes out to the citizens and the residents. The measure would cost just 50 cents for every $100 that is spent. And essential items such as groceries, medicine, healthcare services are exempt. With our tourist economy, a very large part of our sales tax will be generated by visitors, allowing them to pay their fair share for the impact that they also have on our roads. By law, again, the funding can never be used for any other purpose by the city, now or in the future. There's the local control and accountability, and the 3 levels of accountability that I shared with you: the restriction, the Roads Management Authority, and the Community Oversight Committee. Fixing our roads is imperative. Measure C will allow the community to have restricted funds to repair. I believe, and it's why I'm standing up here tonight, I believe very much in this roads measure, and I think that it's something that our community, myself as a community member, and I'm hoping you as a community member too, sees as a very good thing for our community. So we'll talk more later. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. So now I'd actually like to turn it to Jim to talk about a little bit of the logistics behind where the money's going to go, city's priority, and how they plan on repairing the roads. So Jim, I guess, can you talk about sort of how many miles of roads the city maintains, and sort of the average cost of upkeep for those roads and what those repair costs look like today?
Sure. Thank you, everybody. Jim Marino. I'm Assistant Director of the Public Works Department for the City of South Lake Tahoe. One of the things that I'd like to point out is first of all, the city is responsible for maintaining 129 centerline miles of roadway. within the city limits, paved roadway. That's enough in lane miles each way to get us from here to roughly Santa Cruz, okay? We also do all of the ancillary operations on the roadway. So when you talk about a roadway, it's not just the paving. I want everybody to realize that. The ancillary operations on the roadway are signs, signals, striping, sweeping, maintenance of all the shoulders, all the ADA curb ramps, all the curbs, all those elements that go along with the roadway. So I want to put that out front first to give you an idea that we also maintain that stuff within the right-of-way. Basically, it's hard to predict how much a mile of roadway will cost to rehab because the rehab treatment is different. Every section of roadway will typically require its own treatment method. For example, the past roadway project we did this year, 2017, was funded at an amount of $1.6 million. Our treatment that we put into that project was a simple 2-inch mill and overlay. We cut the roadway 2 inches deep, and we repaved it back 2 inches thick, okay? This is normal practice to extend the life of a roadway. For that $1.6 million, we were able to do 2.9 centerline miles of roadway. So that gives you an idea of the scale of cost to rehabilitate a roadway, okay? Now, there are many factors in determining how much a mile of roadway costs to rehabilitate. Is it a primary road that's going to require a lot of traffic control by the contractor? That's an element, okay? Is it a primary road that has a lot of drainage infrastructure and other utilities within the roadway surface? That's going to also impact the cost. How's our economy doing? If our economy is on the downslide, construction costs are usually very relative to that, and we can get more work done. Flip that over like we are in 2017, the economy's strong, contractors are putting a premium on the work, and we're getting less amount of mileage done per dollar. So I hope that gives you an idea that it's not just a straightforward answer on how much we can do. There are several techniques that we want to do for this program moving forward if it comes to fruition. We want to break the program into 4 elements: preventive maintenance, rehabilitation maintenance, reconstruction maintenance, and new construction. New construction probably won't happen very often. The city's pretty much developed out. We don't have that much vacant land to create new roads, okay? So really the 3 elements are preservation of our good roads, and it is far, far better to keep your roads in a preventative maintenance condition than to let them deteriorate to a condition where they are now, and we have to put a lot of money into rehabilitating them. Rehabilitation work is simple: extending the life of the roadway. These are treatments like minor overlays, slurry seals, things that extend the life of the road, okay? And then, of course, reconstruction. This is where we are today in a lot of our roads. Over 62% of the entire 129 centerline miles is in a condition that will require reconstruction in the next 10 years, okay? That's a big amount. The roads, the history of the roads in South Lake Tahoe, basically, South Lake Tahoe was incorporated. Many of the county roads were already in place. The dedication had already gone through the county of El Dorado. We inherited them. The roads were built to standards of the 1940s, 1950s, never intending to see the traffic volumes that we see today, the environmental conditions that we see today, okay? And quite honestly, not really built to a standard to adhere drainage and other issues. So when we go and we talk about reconstructing roadways, we are talking about getting that structural section up to speed, possibly some curb and gutter in areas to correct micro drainage problems, possibly some storm drains in areas to correct things that are affecting that roadway so that we're not wasting the dollars that we're putting down. So I hope that answers your question. Feel free to follow up with anything. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you. So now I guess I'll turn to Bruce. So Bruce, you've come out as sort of against the Measure C initiative. So can you explain a little bit of why you're against Measure C?
Sure.
Microphone.
Oh, all right.
It's on.
Right?
Just
Okay. Too close, too far, it's all right. Like this?
perfect.
Okay. My name is Bruce Grego. This year I've lived in Tahoe for 50 years. So I've seen this town develop over time. You know, there's no question that our roads need to be fixed. The question is, what is the funding source? The roads are failing today because the city councils have failed to make a commitment to fix the roads from the general fund. They have allowed funding to go to other endeavors. I have an example I've used in another forum I attended on this matter. If you went to a restaurant and you ordered a meal, would you think it's fair to charge you for the fork and knife? Well, that's what's happening here. We have a core service that's not being addressed by the city. And now their solution is to tax us some more. There's a lot of comments about Measure C that I've read. One comment was that the city spent $107,000 on a fireplace at the city hall. I know that I was involved in Measure P, which was against the parking meters. The city heard the comments from the citizens, installed parking meters, and had to rip them out after the measure passed by a large margin. More waste of public funds. It's a lack of will to use the monies that they have, and it's much easier just to add another tax to cover up misappropriation, or not most misappropriation, but misfunding of existing tax dollars. There's been increases in employee salaries. According to Lake Tahoe News, in the year 2000, 2002, 4, 5, 11, and 16, there's been no paving of roads, new roads. I think allowing or passage of Measure C will create a precedent in that the city will come back to us with other essential services and ask for a special tax for those. I don't know if you know or not, but I'm a lawyer. This year, I've been practicing law 37 years. I've read the initiative. There's a lot of wiggle room in it. The city is trying to convince you that this is an ironclad, absolute promise to fix the roads. Yet, the expenditure committee that's referenced in the initiative allows them to change direction. Again, I think a lot of people that would vote for C believe that they're going to fix the roads, but they might end up with bicycle trails and other accessories. There's an oversight committee to give you comfort that there be someone watching the spending of these dollars. But the oversight committee has no power. It can review the expenditures, but it can't object to them and stop the expenditure from being spent. So do we have those protections in the ordinance regarding expenditures? I don't believe we do. Some have said that the people in favor have said that tourists will pay for this tax, but we haven't seen any hard statistics as to, verified statistics as to how many tourists will pay the sales tax increase as opposed to the locals. Finally, I want to remind you that this is a special election. I've been involved in Measure P and then Measure T, which is the Loop Road. And we've been criticized that we've had those elections during general elections, and it would cost the city some sum of money. A special election costs a lot more. I've heard estimates as high as $60,000. Why? Because the city believes that those in favor will come out and overwhelm the people against it because there's not many voters during a special election. Please vote, because your vote really counts. And again, spending $60,000 for election is a lot of money that could also be used for roads.
Perfect. I think there was a lot in there. I know we're going sort of our first question for each of the panelists, but I would like to give Wendy a chance to, I guess one of the things that stuck out to me was the city and their past budgeting of roads and rehabilitation. So maybe Wendy, if you could specifically address the city's thinking and prioritization of roads and rehabilitation of roads in the current city budget process.
I can speak to, I've only been a council member for 3 years, so I don't go back 50. But I can speak to what we had in our budget this year. For example, this year we had $1.6 million in our roads budget. And then after our winter, when the potholes were a large problem, the city allocated an additional $300,000 for roads. So this year alone, we had in our budget, we budgeted 1.6 and then another 300,000. So we had $1.9 million for this past year. I'd also like to reference back to Mr. Grego, your comment about a fireplace costing $107,000. I believe it was $17,000, so those zeros do matter. And that was just for edification of everyone. We had to do a lot of work on our blowers and on our heating system in our foyer, I guess you'd call it. And we had money that was restricted to being used for the airport. So we're talking apples and oranges. This was not money that was misspent or that could be used on our roads. So those two things. There are some other things that maybe we can address later.
Yeah, definitely.
You.
So now I'd like to turn to you, Steve Teixeira. As a representative of the business community, as CEO of the Tahoe Chamber, why is the Tahoe Chamber coming out in favor of Measure C?
First of all, Devin and everyone, like to say thanks for TRYP inviting Tahoe Chamber to co-present along with South Tahoe Chamber. Tammy said it's Chamber Appreciation Day, so let's appreciate our chambers. So I want to talk a little bit about the process. So Tahoe Chamber is very active at the local government level and state and federal as well. So obviously we follow the city, in this case, the city budget and the city process very closely. We have an active government affairs committee, which is comprised of both chamber members and others who are very active politically. So we took a hard look at this because anytime there's a tax increase, it's an impact for all of us, citizens, businesses. And sales tax does not hit all businesses equally. Some, Mr. Knight's business, pay a little bit more. Others, they don't have a sales tax on their particular business transactions. But one of the things we do at the Chamber, of course, is survey our members to see how they feel about something significant like a sales tax increase. So we did a survey of our members, and it was about 2 to 1 of members in favor, 2 versus 1 against. So it's pretty close probably to the 2/3 that we need to pass the measure. So not a slam dunk. Not every business in this community said, I'm all for it. But when you step back and you look at the business decision, I think that's where we began to go with our ultimate decision that was made by our board of directors. So we had a member survey, 2 to 1 in favor. We looked at our Vision 2020 document, which is our sort of vision of what the community should look like. And there's a really important, what we call pillar in there, and it's infrastructure. So we thought this is very consistent with our vision of the community of having quality infrastructure. It's good for quality of life, it's good for business, and it's good for business at all levels, our local business as well as, of course, the tourism industry. And as Mr. Marino said, many of the roads the city inherited were never built properly to begin with. There was a dirt road, somebody threw down some asphalt, calls it a road. It's not a road. It's not certainly today's standard. So I think there's a huge backlog. I think the city uses a pavement management program, right, Jim? And they've gone out and they've assessed the status of every road in South Lake Tahoe, and the average score is 49. When I went to school, 49 wasn't a passing grade. So that's not good. We have a huge backlog of roads to fix. And the issue of the general fund, I don't know of any successful local government that funds any sustainable infrastructure or other program out of its general fund. The general fund, there's just too many straws in that soda. And you can't protect it against something coming up, whether it be personnel or any other expense that you might need to do. So the general fund isn't adequate to begin with, and it certainly can't sustain a program like investment in the roads. So we looked at that issue. We looked at when you have a stable source of funding, you can bond against it, you can plan for a certain amount of money you know is going to be available every year, and you can execute on the expenditure plan that Mr. Marino discussed. So it's a good business decision and it's sustainable over a long period of time. In the 15 years that it will be in place, I think we'll all be able to judge whether or not the program has really been successful in terms of touching every center lane mile of road in that period of time. And I think it'll be successful. We like the Citizens Oversight Committee. Yes, they don't necessarily have power per se, but it certainly provides a level of citizens oversight. But you and I, the voters, the people in the community, we are also part of the Oversight Committee. We can go and testify before council. We can make our feelings known. If we think the program is somehow off track, we don't give up our right to a Citizens Oversight Committee. We have that right as citizens. The Roads Management Authority, I think, is a unique part of this that the City Council has put in place. I see Brent Golagowski here tonight. I know he got appointed yesterday by council, so congratulations, Brent. Hope you get a chance to serve. And I didn't see Mary Ann Brand here this evening, but I know she got appointed, and the council is taking additional applications for that. Some of the other things that we looked at was the environmental effects. As Mr. Marino indicated and as Wendy said, you know, the roads are in bad shape, and it contributes to a degradation of water clarity, water quality, and it looks pretty ratty. We look pretty ratty as a community. We don't feel good about that as community members. We don't feel good about that inviting our guests to be here for that kind of a look in our community. So there's an environmental and a quality of life and quality of experience component to this. So when we looked at the whole picture, as I've described it, and as Wendy articulated and Jim articulated, we felt comfortable that this was a good investment. Yes, it was going to be something that not just the visitors pay, we have to pay too, but we think it's a good long-term investment, and we think it's a good business decision, and that's why Tahoe Chamber as a business organization came out in favor of Measure C. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. So now I'll actually turn it to the other Steve on our panel, Steve Knight. And can you explain a little bit about how you feel this tax may negatively affect your company's business? And have you seen effects of other sales tax increases in the past, such as Measure Q?
Great question. So nice to meet you all. I haven't been here for 50 years or 25 years or even a year. I've been here 4 months, so I'm new to Tahoe, but not new to the business world and the business environment. I've been fortunate to live in several states and several cities and run a business. And I've seen the effects of a tax increase specifically when it comes to business. I'm not going to just talk about my business, but every business or anyone in here who runs a business. So National Automobile Dealers Association, which is a nationwide group, did a 10-year study to see the impact of sales tax increases, specifically for the automotive space, but for business in general. And here's what we found. When there's a sales tax increase, 66% of businesses will pass that cost on to the consumer. 58% will postpone expansion of their business. Even worse, 28% will cut their existing staff. Is that what we really want to do? Isn't there a better way to raise the money? Shouldn't we be working on trying to expand and better our businesses so we can hire and pay more people who pay into the tax base? That's what I'm thinking. Short and sweet. I appreciate you guys listening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. And now I'll turn it to our final panelist of the evening before we open it up to audience Q&A. And just so you guys know, I'm very pleased with all the questions that are coming in. The reason we have our audience members write the questions down is so that we can eliminate duplications in questions and make sure everything's streamlined so we can get more of those questions out there. So for Kenny, I know you've got some alternate ideas on how to potentially raise money to rehabilitate roads in South Lake Tahoe. So I guess I'd give you a chance to talk about your third option.
Good evening. Hi. Thanks. And thanks for inviting me in this. And thanks for everybody showing up. And hi to everybody on the TV. You know, I got to admit, I'm yes and no on this Measure C. I agree with everything that everybody said. I have studied Measure C. I went to all the meetings, and a lot of times I was the only citizen there at that meeting, along with all the city officials. And they have come up with an excellent plan to fix our roads. When you go to fix the roads, you've got to remember, it's not just the roads in the center lane like Jim was talking about, and everybody else was talking about. We've got to take care of the outside of the roads, which includes the bike paths. And I understand that that's one of the biggest things that everybody's talking about, that we want the money just to go for potholes and fix the road and not fix the bike paths. We need to fix the bike paths as well as the roads. Where are we going to get the money? Okay, everybody's talking about the budget. The city came up with $2.5 million a year. They based that off of Measure Q tax, which is this year, or last year was $2.5 million. In 2010, it was $1.7 million. It has gone up every year, but that's an unrealistic number because we are headed for a bubble. We're going to have another drop in the economy. We're not going to be guaranteed that $2.5 million. It's probably going to be closer to the 1.7. So where are we going to get the other money? We need to look at who is using our roads and our infrastructure. Yes, we are using the roads. I drive on the roads every day. I probably drive 500 miles a week in this town through my business. Yes, I'm willing to pay for that tax. I use the roads. I should pay for it. We also have the vacation home rentals. We have had a 17% increase in the last year in vacation rentals. The people coming up to visit, they come into our city streets. They use our city streets. They should help pay for that also. I realize that everybody tells me, or a lot of people tell me, we are taxing the tourists to death. I don't believe that's so. We need to have them pay for our roads just as much as we do. A 2%, 4% increase in the TOT tax for VHRs only. And the reason I say VHRs is because they're using our neighborhoods. The motels and hotels are not using our neighborhoods. They're going straight to the casinos and spending their money. We need to find another funding source. TOT is one of them with the VHRs only. Another one is Heavenly Ski Resort and the Vail Corporation. They have had a pass on paying a user fee. I'm going to call it a user fee. I'm not going to call it a tax. A user fee for the selling of their lift tickets since they started in this town. Okay? Right now, the other Vail, resorts that the Vail Corporation is in, Breckenridge and Vail, the town of Vail. Vail has had since 1996, they've had a tax or a user fee on their lift tickets, and they are averaging $4.5 million a year in money that goes directly to the transportation and the city of Vail. That's why they look like what they do. Breckenridge, last year, passed a tax that just passed in August of 2016, and it's an ordinance that is going to raise money from lift ticket sales. Okay? When people come up here, they buy a lift ticket. That will not affect the local because we buy passes. Okay, so we're going to get our money strictly from the tourists that visit here. Breckenridge is going to get no less than $3.5 million a year from the sale of their lift ticket tax, user fee, excuse me. They only have a population of 4,000 people. So this user fee is not based on population, it's based on tourist visits, which the people, when they come up here, they're using our roads, they're wrecking our roads, we're using our roads, I'm wrecking the roads, I want to pay for it. I think they should too. They have taken the CEOs of the Vail Corporation in Breckenridge and Vail. They have offered to work with the community to help with affordable housing, transportation costs, and everything based off of the user fee that they generate to each town. Last year, Breckenridge wanted to, or excuse me, Vail, last year, Vail wanted to raise the tax from 4% to 6% in order to not go through a fight like similar to what we're doing right now in this town, and it's pitting local against local. They offered to get involved with affordable housing and transportation in lieu of a ballot measure. The CEO from Vail said that. They're working with each town except South Lake Tahoe. I think it's about time that we get the money from the tourists that are coming up and using our facilities and using our infrastructure to help pay for that. Okay, so am I for or against Measure C? I am for what Measure C is going to accomplish. I am against Measure C passing because I look at, if this passes, I look at this as kicking the can down the road for making the people pay their fair share for what they're using our town for. I would like to see Measure C fail in this ballot. I would like to see them come back with another ordinance to tax Heavenly, tax the VHRs through the TOT, and put it back on the ballot. And I would endorse that, and I think everybody else would endorse that 100%. But what they're doing with the roads and how they're going to fix them is exactly what we need. We cannot just fix the roads and the potholes. We need to fix the bike paths and everything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenny. So I think, Kenny, you raised some very, very good points about this alternate, but I would like to actually open this sort of a rebuttal back to Wendy and Bruce. And based off of an audience question, sort of if this Measure C does not pass, is there a plan in place that would be able to pay for the roads and the things we need that Measure C is trying to accomplish? Or any other sort of rebuttal points you want to make to Kenny's
Okay,
point?
first, and I'm not an expert on this, but your idea about Heavenly is an awesome idea, and the city can enter into that 15 years from now, and I'll tell you why. We have a bond agreement with them, a redevelopment bond agreement, that part of that agreement was that Heavenly would not be taxed, and we have a community facilities district as a result of that. Part of that community facilities district with our partners is that they cannot be passed. Now, what I heard was people saying, well, that's just an MOU. It is not just an MOU. It is part of the bond redevelopment repayment for the next 15 years. It ironically does sunset. I think it's 2031. Okay, well, what I understand is that the payment will be done in 2031. So let me phrase it that way. So I would encourage that you give us this 15 years, and then I think it's an excellent. So thank you, Kenny, for your research on that. I think it's excellent. To answer the other question, to my knowledge, no, there is not some magic pot of money that's going to be used for our roads if this does not pass. In fact, and I'm sure most of the people in this audience know, our CalPERS payments for every city, county in the state of California is rising dramatically. We, in our budget year this year, will have an extra $1 million payment that is due, and that is expected to rise from our current $4.5 million to $9 million. And so we also, I think, as Mr. Kurtzweiler said, we anticipate that we also will have tighter budget years, not more expansive budget years. So unless Jim Marino knows of some secret pot of money, I do not.
Perfect. Actually, I'd like to throw it to Bruce. Do you have any alternative ideas to raising the needed funds?
Also that
Microphone.
I was also going to mention that as a result of redevelopment in the state line, the city basically waived their right to assess the ski tickets for Heavenly for a long period of time, and that cut off a lot of income for us. We did other things. We're also giving the Marriott Center approximately $135,000 to $50,000 as a contribution to a private enterprise every year. Those are the issues that have taken away monies from our roads. And by the way, you know, the general fund has a dedicated source of funds. Property taxes, sales taxes. This new measure is nothing new. It's just more taxes.
But as a former city council member, I know you mentioned sort of the redevelopment area, the Marriott, but don't you think there's an economic value to offering incentives to these private industries to come in and create jobs and create a tax base for our community? You speak to it as...
When I was on the council, I did a lot of reading on that, and there's a feeling that local government gives too much away to get these kind of concessions. And the term for the gondola monies, to assess the ski tickets, it was much too long a period, and has hurt our community.
I'd actually like to go to Kenny. It seems like you have a counterpoint to what Wendy said.
According to the contract that was written on page 47, item 1010, that the bond or to not let Heavenly pay any money on their taxes on their lift tickets, as long as there is a bond on the redevelopment project. So there is no sunset. So if the bond is on there for 30 years, they're not going to pay taxes for 30 years. If we pay that bond off in 5 years, we can start charging them a user fee. It also says that we can, before the bond is paid off, that we can do a user fee or a tax with Heavenly Valley's consent. So if they agree to it, and I don't see any reason why they wouldn't want to agree to help this town out, we can impose a user fee. The CEO for Vail Mountain's chief operating officer in Vail, they were going to have a ballot measure. And in lieu of a ballot measure and a fight, like I mentioned before, they offered to work with the community. Vail offered to work with the community instead of fighting this through the ballot. They did the same thing in Breckenridge. Nobody has ever approached Vail and said, hey, look, we have a problem in this town. You guys are part of this town. You need to help us also. Every time I bring this up, I've just been told, no, it can't happen. That just makes me want to do it even more. I've just put in an email and a phone call to Rob Katz, who is the CEO and the president. He's the big cheese of Vail. I asked him for help. I'm also going to ask our local CEO for help. They've already offered in Breckenridge. They've already offered in Vail to help us. So why can't they help us here?
So Jim, if you have a counterpoint to Kenny, I'd love to hear that, but I'd also like to turn it to some of our audience questions that I think you'll know sort of the more logistics of. One of them is, can funds from Measure C be used for bike paths, bike lanes, and or sidewalks? And if there's any other restrictions on that money, or is it straight going to roads?
Certainly, thank you. First, I'd like to just point out, I think Kenny's idea is great, honestly. I think Heavenly should be paying a user fee or some other fee to the city for services, especially fire, public safety, and all the other elements that go towards that business. However, I don't think the roads is what they should be paying for. I think input into affordable housing, I think input into emergency services, those elements should be coming from the ski area. So I'll end with that, and I'll try and answer the other question that's before us today. The bike trail components of Measure C, yes, there's an expenditure plan that's attached to Measure C that includes multiple elements that Measure C funds can be used for. Bike trails, curb and gutter, drainage work, all kinds of things. Traffic loops, guardrails, retaining walls, signs, it's all in there if you were to read the document. Will it be used for those things? That's the question on the table. Honestly, we have a program to repair and rehabilitate roads that are in terrible conditions. I said earlier that 62% of our roadway network is deteriorating rapidly, and over the next 10 years will come to failure. There is no time to be building bike trails with Measure C, okay? If the trail is an element of the road that we are reconstructing, we may take a look at funding some repairs or replacement of that element, okay? If there are ADA curb ramps or sidewalks that are ancillary to the road we are repairing, we will bring those up to current standards and codes, okay? Honestly, 15-year timeline for Measure C sunset is barely enough for us to make the dent in the 62% of the roads, which is mostly your residential roads, by the way, okay, which don't have sidewalks, don't have bike trails on them. Now, will we leverage Measure C funds? Possibly. The city has been very successful over the last 10 to 15 years of securing grants for mobility projects, bike trails, pedestrian walkways, other sorts of elements of mobility, okay? In each case, the city is required to put up a monetary match for those grants. That's how it works. For the last several years, we've been getting very creative. We've been using in-kind staff match. In other words, our salaries as match, so we can accomplish millions of dollars in grants that we're getting. Okay. If we have a grant for a bike trail project and it requires a cash match by the city, it would make sense to utilize some of Measure C because you are leveraging a very small amount, probably 5 to 10% of the project cost, for $3 to $5 to $7 million in state and federal funds. You are leveraging the source. And that is the intent of what staff wants to do moving forward. This is not simply about pulling in cash and fixing a road. This is about pulling in cash, creating a long-term sustainable program, and leveraging those funds to the maximum amount possible. So while every other issue is coming to play in the city over the next 15 years, whether it be PERS issues, whether it be other infrastructure issues, whether it be fire or public safety issues, you would be getting your road work done. That is the key, what we're talking about here. Thank you.
Yeah, so a follow-up question that we had from the audience is, if Measure C were not to pass, or in the 15 years Measure C would be around, if we did not have that money, how many additional years or extended timeline would it take to complete those repairs that Measure C could provide?
Great question, great question. So let's assume, starting tomorrow, Measure C does not pass, and there's very little or very sporadic funds assigned to the roadways, as has been for 23 years, okay? We can assume a decline of the roadway by 2 PCI points a year. PCI, very quickly for everybody, 0 is a completely failed dirt road, 100 is a brand new road. City's network average is at 49 right now. Assuming very little money is put into the system, we will decrease by 2 points a year. So in 10 years, we would be at a 39. In 15 years, we would be at 31, okay? 34 is considered failure rate in most cities, all right? Now, we can even take that further because there's a decline curve in everything in life. The older it gets, the faster it declines. It doesn't matter if it's man-made or organic, okay? It's true. And in the roadway and in the pavement world, the deterioration curve accelerates rapidly after 15 years. And that is what we're seeing in town right now. We are seeing a rapid deterioration. So it's likely to fall far greater than 2 points a year.
Perfect. So I'd like to now go to Mr. Knight for another audience question. This audience question says, thanks for your business thoughts. Do you have any comments on vehicle damage or being in the auto industry? Do you see a direct correlation with auto damage and repairs and needs based on road condition? And could horrible roads actually benefit auto repair businesses?
That is a great question. Believe it or not, what causes most of automotive damage and repairs that we see are driver error and lack of changing your oil, doing regular maintenance and routine maintenance, and most of all, snow. Not so much in potholes or poor road conditions. Vehicles today are made to perform. Most of what you buy up here, most of what I sell is going to be an off-road four-wheel drive product. It's designed to handle much more than a few potholes. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and now I'd like to go, I guess, back to the other Steve regarding Mr. Knight's questions and comments on tax impacting the community, and what did the chamber and sort of the businesses the chamber represents see when there was the previous quarter-cent tax increase in the city, and did that actually affect businesses in a negative way from what your members have expressed to you?
We haven't received any specific feedback from any specific business member about the specific impact of a particular increment of sales tax. I think people do talk about the cumulative impact of taxes. There's, various property taxes. We had a college bond measure. We have certain special districts in which some of us live. So there is a concern on the part of the business community about cumulative tax load. and there's a lot of fees and other things associated with being in business, particularly in the state of California. So business owners frequently talk about the cumulative impact of taxes and fees and all of those kinds of things. And we try to work with the cumulative group of taxing entities to get them to be sensitive to what the ultimate burden is on residents and businesses. So I can't speak to specific increments of tax. Obviously, this would be a big increment of tax, ½ cent. But again, I think we look at it from a business point of view of saying, yes, there's the tax issue and there's the cost of doing business, which is not insignificant. It really is a burden on a lot of businesses, particularly smaller businesses. But we have the community's future in our mind. We're thinking about what time is the right time to make an investment. As Mr. Marino just said, the longer we wait, the more costly it's going to be. So we would like to say, let's support Measure C. Let's get that assessment and that tax in place. Let's go with the road expenditure plan, and let's invest in the future of our community. I would like to look back, and I think many of us here would like to look back and say, back in 2017, that was a great decision to pass Measure C. It really benefited this community for the long term. I think back of the people that came before us, who decided to build the Golden Gate Bridge or the Bay Bridge or any of the infrastructure projects that serve us today. If we today made the same kind of decisions that they made, the future will benefit, both the short-term and the long-term future. If there wasn't a Golden Gate Bridge or a Bay Bridge or some of the infrastructure that we enjoy, what kind of a lifestyle, what kind of a business climate, what kind of a quality of life would we have? So we're thinking about today and the right decision, and we're thinking about the future.
Great, thank you. So Kenny, it seems like you have a response to that, but but Kenny,
Okay,
before you speak, I just want to remind the panelists, we are coming up on our last half hour of this event, so keeping it short, and then I have a follow-up question for you after you're done, Kenny.
This will be fast. When they built the box stores down in Douglas County, Costco and everything else, they did a survey, and they did it based on zip codes. And as a business owner, and by the way, I'm a member of both chambers as well, and the zip code, 29% of the business that was going down to Douglas County because they were getting a better deal and a lower tax rate came from the zip code 96150. Now that was about 7 or 8 years ago when they started building all that stuff. It has only increased since then. So with another ½ which will make us almost 1.25% higher than them, it's actually going to drive people down there. So there was a survey done for the business owners. And I can tell you as a business owner, it's unfortunate, but when I have to buy a big ticket item, I will probably go down there. And I have bought 5 cars from your business, but I cannot guarantee I'm going to buy another one.
So that sort of raises into my next question that I was going to ask is, Kenny, if anyone in the audience or watching the live stream right now isn't familiar, Kenny, you're a Myers resident. You don't technically have a vote on Measure C, but where do you feel your sort of standing is in giving input in this? I know you're here on the panel tonight and you've brought some new ideas. And as a follow-up to maybe Wendy would be the best to answer this, are you considering allowing county residents, because they're also using the roads so much, I know our lines are very close together, for the Roads Commission?
Okay, the very first meeting that I went to, it was hinted that I was going to be on the committee when it happened, and it was said over and over that we want to include the Myers community also because we're a big part of this community. In fact, we are this community also. It's just Myers and South Lake Tahoe, but we're one community. I have been told lately that you cannot be on the committee unless you are a registered voter in the city of South Lake Tahoe. So if Myers can't have a voice in it, then when we're talking about all these other people, the Tahoe Chamber and the South Tahoe Chamber and the El Dorado County Chamber who are endorsing Measure C, they don't live here either. They don't get a vote either. So why should their input be any more or any less than mine, which is not allowed now?
I'd like to turn that to you, Wendy, to talk about the Roads Commission, who's making it up, and maybe if there is a possibility of opening it up to county residents as well.
Thank you. The Roads Commission has been restricted to residents, and I will tell you why. My understanding of that is this is a sales tax, and the sales tax, those that voted on this sales tax then have an opportunity to oversee that sales tax. This is a tax that our residents of South Lake Tahoe are going to be voting on. It's a sales tax that directly affects them, and so it's a sales tax that we're asking our residents to serve on the Roads Management Authority. It's the first I've heard that you had wanted to be on it. You know, it's a possibility. I'm certainly open to that discussion if it's something that is an important discussion to the greater community.
Great. So Bruce, I kind of want to go back to you. One of our audience members asked and commented on one of your earlier points about sort of some of the money you think has been frivolously spent by the city. However, they noticed it was sort of 10,000 this, 60,000 this, 100,000 this. But with the roads, it's a multi-million, $10 million need that we have. So you think the city's nickeling and diming on frivolous things, but how do you propose really raising that large amount of money that we need to fix our roads, those $1 million figures?
Well, again, I think...
Microphone?
I'm sorry. You know, fiscal management.
Up a little higher.
Fiscal management. It can accomplish these ends. I wasn't prepared to go and attack every element of the budget. We don't have that time. But I think fiscal management can have it. This is a core service. This is a core service. The city should not be coming back. And consider this. If Measure C passes, it's likely that all other funds in the general funds that are being used for roads will disappear, just like it did for the snow removal tax on parcels. Once the city got their hands on that money, there was no funds available for snow equipment replacement, and now they want to come back and raise that. Look at the precedent this creates. Every time there's a real need for road improvement. No doubt. But we're going to wait for every service to become in this state of disrepair so that there's a reason for us to have another special tax. How much taxes should we have to pay?
So Jim and/or Wendy, I'd like to turn to you, and maybe you can talk about the 66.7% requirement and what that means for how the money can be spent in the future.
Sure. So the majority vote that's required for this tax measure ensures that the money can only be spent on the items that are within the expenditure plan that's out the ballot now. Okay, and we've talked about those briefly. Okay, the assurances is that we're going to be paving roads with that money. Right? That's what we have to do. As a program manager, as a director of Public Works, I have to pave the roads with that money, and that's about it. It's not going to go anywhere else. Regarding the question whether or not money will be diverted from the existing roads program, our existing roads program, I want everybody to understand, the city has two roads programs. We have an operations road program, and we have a project roads program. The operations roads program is funded through state gas tax, primarily, not 100%, and there's a city general fund offset into that. That operations program is what does the street sweeping, the street striping, the signage, the traffic lights, and all the other ancillary work, including snow removal, okay? That's not going anywhere. We can't strip that, all right? If we strip that, we basically walk off the roads, and you guys would be driving around like crazy maniacs, all right? The other element of the Public Works Department is project-based road work, and that's what we're talking about with Measure C, the consistent annual summer roadway rehabilitation program, okay? And that is where Measure C will go. There is no intention of stripping anything out of the general budget. Thank you.
Great, and I think Wendy, based off an audience question we received, maybe you'd like to address this. There's been some examples raised tonight and some examples in the past of the city's potential inability to manage its budget and money moving around. So it seems that there is some concern with the city's ability to manage this extra revenue coming in. I know Jim addressed sort of the restrictions on this, but I don't know if you want to, as a member of the city council, address maybe some of the community's concern around the city's budgeting and ability to keep their promises around how the money's spent.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I think that often government in general is put in a position of not being trusted. And so government is always held to a much higher standard, and it's a standard we accept. We are held to a very high standard. I've held myself to a high standard my entire life, and I, as an elected official, hold my city government to a high standard. Because of that, I feel very confident, and it concerns me that there's this perception out there that we're not held to a high standard, but we are, and I can validate, and we've had many discussions about this. One discussion that I had just today saying, I don't want to go out in the public tonight and to say something that isn't going to be absolutely true for the next life of this ballot, not the life of this measure, excuse me. And I said, I want to know that our roads budget, for instance, our operations budget, is going to be exactly what it was, and that this is simply going to be for road repair, which is what the ballot measure says, what we're held to, which quite frankly, we have put in everything we could in a legal way to make sure that this money goes exactly for what you'd be voting for. I do this, and we do this because we believe this is needed. It's interesting to me that everyone agrees we need this for our community. There is no argument about that. The argument is about, is it the right way to do it? Is it the best way to do it? I think the city has come up with a very good solution to this, and I think that we each have a responsibility and obligation as community members to consider it, and then, of course, vote your conscience.
Mr. Knight, and then Mr. Grego.
Thank you. Absolutely, we should hold government to a higher standard. The key word there is we. They don't make the decisions, we do. We do hold them to a higher standard. My concern is our government, our city government is coming to us with one option. The roads are not going to fail tomorrow. We need to go back, we need to implore our government to go back to the drawing board and come up with a better plan or an alternative plan. You know, as Kenny said, VAIL, TOT, VHRs, there are opportunities to get other people to be involved, other companies that use our roads, use our infrastructure to be involved. It's not going to fail tomorrow, people. Vote it down. Let's come up with an alternative or a better plan.
And then Bruce?
Perhaps this council has the good faith intent to follow through what the voters want to do. There's no guarantee for the future, but I say this again. Look at the ordinance. It says the expenditure plan may be amended from time to time by the Road Management Authority. And all revenue expended shall be audited and reviewed by the Citizens Oversight Committee. But the language there, in my mind, creates flexibility and allows diversion that is not anticipated right now, but will be interpreted by later councils. You know, there's an article in the Lake Tahoe News, I think it came out yesterday, and it says, this is from another news source. It says, opinion, don't trust government with new tax money. The first sentence says, reassurances to taxpayers about the proper management of new revenue on state and local level is often ignored by politicians once the money is secured. You know, I want to remind everybody where our City Hall is today. It's at the airport. Do you remember the arguments that were happening when people were saying, let's save money and put the City Hall at the airport because other people wanted to build a new City Hall? And this is, it's impossible to put the City Hall at the airport. And all of a sudden, it became a fact. The money can be found from the general fund if there's the political desire and commitment to do so. More taxes is an easy way out for those that want to address the immediate problem and not worry about the impacts upon the people that live here and the taxpayers in this community.
Mr. Shara?
Pass the gravy, thank you. So just a couple points on the recent conversation here. One is this proposal has been well vetted over a long period of time. Many city council meetings, many hearings, the survey that was done, the measure that was said, you know, do you want to use it for roads? Do you want to use it for city infrastructure? Do you want to use it for housing? People say we want to use it for roads. So there's been well over a year, probably closer to 2 years, of vetting this proposal, Measure C, in a public setting with lots of people having different opinions expressed and the council fashioning a proposal that's now Measure C on an upcoming ballot. Other ideas that have been expressed tonight, they haven't been vetted in any public forum. They haven't been run through the gamut of the process that Measure C has. So it's, you know, it's unfortunately a tactic, a part of some. You're getting up to a proposal, oh, there's a better idea. We need to stop and we need to pass on the proposal that's before us and we need to go to some other idea. There isn't another idea that's out there that's been vetted the way that this has. So that's one point. The other point is that, you know, this is an opportunity to vote on Measure C up or down. And that's the opportunity that's before us, and that's the opportunity that we need to take. So keep that in mind and vote your conscience, but think again about what is the legacy we're leaving to the next generation. And there's a lot of people in the next generation here in this room, and there's even some people not very high, not even as high as a chair. And what are we leaving to them for the community of South Lake Tahoe in the future? That's what we have to stay focused on. And, you know, taking a page out of some other proposal that we might think about that hasn't been vetted, that isn't realistic, and putting that forward in place of something that's been vetted very thoroughly, and yes, you can vote one way or the other, but that's the proposal that's before us, and that's what we need to stay focused on.
So, Mr. Teixeira, I will actually follow up with you an additional audience question.
Sure.
I know we've talked a lot tonight, especially with Mr. Knight being here, about sort of the local business impact on sales tax and the local tax impact, but with our economy being very heavily tourism-based, do you see, as a representative of the chamber, that the sales tax increase would affect visitor and tourism spending at all?
Well, I can't really, I don't think it's fair to sit up here and say, no, it doesn't. I mean, everybody makes individual decisions on where they go and what they spend and where they do it. And Mr. Kurtzweiler talked about, we know that people in our community, we go off the hill to buy certain things, and we have choices in where we buy. What we try to support at the chamber is people shopping locally, buying locally as much as possible. We have a Go Local program that we promote. This will be our second big holiday season coming up, where we've extended that for the year round, because we're supporting businesses that are supporting our community, whether they support Little League or whether they support one of our many nonprofit organizations. The money that we're spending stays in the community. So yes, people have choices. Yes, visitors have choices. But we're trying to create a destination that people want to go to and say, I want to go there because, gosh, that South Lake Tahoe is a great community. They have really nice infrastructure. They have nice roads. They have a nice tourism product. They have great recreation opportunities. The people there are friendly to us when we come. Those are the kinds of themes that we push. We don't nickel and dime ourselves by saying, you know, or we don't falsely claim that, you know, it's not going to have any impact at all. But the impacts are going to be more positive, and they're going to be more positive the more positive we are about it. That's why we're yes on Measure C.
Great. So now I want to go to Jim. And actually, this is sort of sweet. This question comes from 9-year-old Lila. How will you decide which roads to fix first?
Good question. Where does she live? Yeah. So it's a series of data, essentially, okay? Our priorities are going to be our large volume, heavy traffic volume roads right off the start of this program, okay? And the reason being is because we've invested a lot of money in those roads in past years. We want to maintain those roads in good condition, and we want to be able to handle the high traffic flow. When we start to go into residential areas and whatnot, essentially what we're going to try and do is create roads that are in a geographic context. In other words, we're not going to have a contractor split up all across town charging us premium dollar for mobilization and demobilization all through sections. So for example, we may go into Sierra Tract and we may pave 2 or 3 or 4 roads right in Sierra Tract in that residential neighborhood before moving on. Those roads are picked and chosen for a variety of reasons, and I'm going to give you why. One, the score. The score is going to make a big difference on what we do. The lower the score, if we rebuild that road, our overall network average starts to climb, and that's what that's the goal here. Okay. 2 is we have to coordinate with utilities. Not only are our roads 50 years old, but the utilities beneath them are 50 years old. We have been told by Southwest Gas that they are going to replace every single gas main in every single roadway in the city of South Lake Tahoe over the next 10-year time period. We know that South Tahoe Public Utility District has infrastructure needs. We know that Liberty Energy has infrastructure needs. If that road has not been coordinated underneath the roadway, we won't touch it until it's ready. Okay, so that's a prime example of how we're prioritizing the road. So in a nutshell, score, volume, utility coordination. That's how we're going to look at it.
So this may be for you again, or potentially Wendy, but if passed, will this help increase the amount of jobs in South Lake Tahoe? Will the city have more jobs or construction jobs related to that? I know it may be hard to
honestly,
speculate.
I don't think we're going to add, city-wise, I don't think we're going to add anybody to our program. Our operations budget will stay the same. Our streets budget will stay the same. However, I think that when you show a consistent annual project being taken in the city limits for the next 15 years, you're definitely going to see economic impacts from that. Most of the companies that are hired to do this work hire local union laborers and whatnot out of local unions. The vendors, Tahoe Asphalt, for example, Meeks, Sierra Concrete, Ready Mix, all those vendors that have a roadway type component will probably get some work, most likely will get some work. Keep in mind, Tahoe is geographically isolated. We don't have what a lot of other communities have, where we have an asphalt plant that can produce 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 tons of material a day. Okay? So we're winding up bringing up materials from the valley. Okay? We're spending a premium. On top of that, keep in mind that we only have 4 months a year to do road work. We're not Roseville. We can't wait until November while the oil index prices decrease because it's the fall season and start our road work. We don't have that luxury. So yes, in a nutshell, I definitely see an economic stimulus out of it.
So this question is for Wendy. Coming from our audience, the idea that recreational cannabis is a big topic in the community right now as well, and I know something the city of South Lake Tahoe is addressing. Has any of the potential tax revenue that the city could tax on to sales of recreational cannabis, if allowed, been looked at for helping contribute to roads?
We are not considering right now that our cannabis tax would go towards roads. What we are considering, and this is down the road, but when and if recreational cannabis is legal within the city of South Lake Tahoe, we will most likely tax that cannabis, and we will tax it for youth education and prevention and law enforcement and those things that will help to keep our community a healthy community going forward for our families, for our youth, and for those that live there. So like I say, we are not at that point yet, but that is our thought around that with cannabis being legal, that our tax will go to protect our community.
And a slight plug, if you missed our town hall earlier this year on recreational cannabis, you can go to TahoeTRYP.org and check out that video. So let's see, another question for, I guess, Wendy, and then sort of a comment to Bruce. Earlier we were talking about how the election for the vote for Measure C is coming up very soon, and it's under a special election. Bruce, you quoted a figure around $60,000 to hold a special election. Some of the research I had done prior to this on that topic, because it was something I was interested in, shows a lot less than that as an actual cost to hold a special election. So I don't know if you wanted to address that, Wendy, if you know specific costs, but more to Wendy, why now? Why did you guys decide that this was the election cycle on a down cycle to put this measure on the ballot?
I believe it cost $12,000 to put this on the ballot. We decided to do this. It has been part of our strategic plan going forward. We, as you recall, we went to our voters last November. Was it a year ago that we went to our voters with a more of a cafeteria kind of ballot. And we asked our voters if they would support a 1/2 cent sales tax that was a general tax. And we gave them a cafeteria of choices that they could choose. That ballot failed. I think in some ways it was a very confusing ballot. But what came out of that ballot to us was, by the vast majority, our residents said we would support a roads tax. So from that decision, the city council in the city went into discussion, and of course, the winter also had a big effect on us. We went into discussion, we said, you know, if we are being responsible and we are reacting to what our residents are telling us, we need to take the responsibility to take care of our roads and to put out a ballot measure to let our voters decide, just like everyone's saying, decide if they want to invest in our roads for the future. We also have been getting information for many years that our roads are degrading quickly, and just as Mr. Marino said, we really cannot wait any longer for this measure. I hope that answers the question.
Bruce?
My information comes from the elections department in El Dorado County. They says they couldn't give a hard figure, but I have to tell you that my impression is that during the ballot measures that were during general elections, those were costing the city $10,000. And it has an effect on how many other governmental entities are participating in the same election to split the costs. So that's all I can say. They couldn't give me an actual hard number, but that was like the range. And again, I want to say this. Those that favor Measure C are trying to make it an issue of road repair and no road repair. But the real issue is this the proper mechanism to fix the roads? No one's debating the roads need to be fixed, but is this the proper mechanism? Does this have the proper protections?
I think that goes back to the question of what is the alternative? If we don't have this, then what?
Well, I don't think the city is willing to really tell us any alternatives. To do that, it would undercut their position in favor of C. We'll have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, Mr. Knight?
The question was posed earlier, economic stimulus. Certainly, there'll be economic stimulus if you're in the road repair business. For me, and for our business, cost of goods sold, that goes up. Where am I going to pass this off to? I'm not going to hire any more technicians to fix your cars. I can't afford to. I'm probably going to lay off a few people. Unfortunately, sometimes it gets tough. We are, contrary to popular belief, we're not a nonprofit organization. So we have to maintain that. It's a business. There's certainly going to be stimulus. I'm going to have to pass it on to you. Is that what you really want?
So I would like to throw out, we've got about 5 minutes left, so I would actually like to put one more question maybe on Wendy or Jim. I know you're currently seeking applications for your Road Management Authority committee board. So maybe just give a brief, how do people apply, especially our audience members tonight on the live stream, if they've been riled up and super jazzed to go on this topic, how can they get involved, how can they apply?
Thank you. You can go to our website, which is cityofslt.us, and then at the website you'll find the ability to fill out an application for the Roads Management Authority. We will be appointing a total of 7 people to the Roads Management Authority. Yesterday we appointed 2, so there are 5 additional openings. Please, please, please apply for the Roads Management Authority. This will be, and Jim might want to add a little bit about what he sees the Roads Management Authority doing and what their responsibilities would be. But as a council member, I would love to see as many applications as possible, and I will take to heart, Mr. Kurtzweiler, what you mentioned as well.
Yeah, Jim, maybe very briefly, what can I expect if I apply and get accepted on the Roads Authority?
From a program management standpoint, what we would be, RMA would be, is we would be running the entire summer project through you. All the components, all the roads, all the expenditures, all the elements, okay? Then the RMA would approve that project. So essentially, the fears of us spending things on Measure C are quelled at the RMA level before the project ever goes to bid.
Perfect. So now, with our limited time left, I would like to open it up to all the panelists for your closing thoughts, comments, anything else that you didn't get out tonight that you would like to talk about. And I'll just go simple down the line, starting with Kenny, working back towards myself.
The idea of a third alternative and the Measure C being vetted for the last 2 years is correct, but the idea that taxing heavily has not been vetted or not been brought before the public is incorrect. I've been writing an article for approximately 25 years in this town. Starting in 1999, I started bringing up the fact that we need to start charging heavily a user fee. That was the year that they got the pass-through. So this has been vetted, but every time that I have approached the city council, I've gone to city council meetings, I have approached city council members individually, you know, during council meetings and not in council meetings, and I keep getting the, no, we're not going to do that, not going to go any further. So since I'm not a resident of the city, I can't go any further than to actually get involved in something like this and offer a third alternative for what we need to be doing in this town.
And just to clarify, in theory, if there was a fee on Heavenly, that could only be applied to gondola ticket sales, since that's the only lift that leaves from actual city limits, correct?
Yes, and that's one of the things that it's in the contract that we had in 1999. It says lift tickets because it has lift access. The gondola is not a lift. That is a gondola. So technically, you could tax all the tickets going onto the gondola. Also, the other towns that tax it, use a user fee, they charge only winter lift tickets. And that was one of the things that they said, we will not offer lift tickets during the winter, but the gondola is very popular during the summer. So why can't we charge a user fee during the summer?
Steve?
Just to say thank you again to everyone and to the organizations that brought you this program. I just want to add one additional perspective from the business side. Right now, we have a number of businesses in our community that are making a decision as to whether to invest, to expand, to look at, you know, different business opportunities. And we also have people looking at us from the outside. Is this community a good community for investing from a business perspective? We've built up a certain amount of momentum right now, and I think Measure Key and an affirmative vote on Measure C is a part of building that momentum. So people say, hey, that's a good community to invest in, whether I'm here now or I'm looking from the outside, because the people want to invest in themselves. And that is a key business perspective that I hope isn't lost on all of you here tonight. Thanks.
Wendy?
Thank you very much to TRYP and the chambers. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk about Measure C, to talk about the future of our community. I've said this many times, but when I ran for the city council, I'm a 45-year member of this community. I ran because I was actually pretty sad and brokenhearted to live in a community that had become very old and tired and faded looking. And I don't think anybody will disagree with that. In the last 5 to 3 years, moving forward, we've seen a lot of change in this community. We've seen more economic development. We've seen some of our dilapidated buildings being bought and refurbished. And I think we have seen some improvement, and the economy is good. I do believe in Measure C, and I believe that it is good for our community, and I believe that the city has come up with a fair vehicle moving forward to support Measure C and get our roads fixed. You know, Harrison Avenue was a roads project, and that just fixed the roads, but out of Harrison Avenue, then a lot of the businesses there saw that their roads were looking good, and they wanted to improve their businesses as well. I do think we'll see economic development I just thank everyone for being here and for listening live streaming. And we live in a wonderful country where we can go out and vote. And so, like everyone else, I encourage you to vote.
Mr. Knight?
Well, first off, thank you all for being here. I've really enjoyed myself. And more than that, thank you so much for welcoming me and my wife to your community. It's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been, and the hospitality is outstanding, greatly appreciated. So back to the matter at hand. I certainly agree with everyone. I'm sure you would all agree. Our roads do need repair. We do need a long-term solution in place to maintain them. What I'm saying to you, or what I'm hoping you will do, is take a step back. Demand a better solution before you choose the only one that you have. Take a step back. With your input, I'm sure that collectively the community can find a better way to do it. Thank you.
Jim?
Thank you. Everybody, I appreciate this. I really do. I just want to say that Measure C is based on a finite timeline. We have to perform. We have to perform. If granted, if voted, yes, on Measure C, it's up to our department to get it done. That, I can guarantee you, we won't fail you on, all right? This is about, like I said earlier, this is about setting up the future here. This is not about past, and this is not about scrimmaging together odd amounts of dollars every other year. This is about setting up a program that will take us 15 years down the road. 10 years into that program, come to me and tell me how well it's working, okay? We need to do this while everything else in the city and in the county and in the Tahoe Basin is being handled, whether it's stormwater or other issues or other liabilities that may come up in the future. I want to thank everybody for the time. Unfortunately, I cannot vote on this measure. However, I really wish I could. Thank you.
Bruce?
He didn't mention how he was going to vote, though. Never mind. This is a special election. Every vote counts more than in a general election because we're going to have a very finite turnout. Everything is possible in politics if there's the will. This should not be voted, this Measure C should not be voted on because the city is trying to paint a picture where our backs are against the wall. There are other alternatives. Reject Measure C. There's not enough of protection. And again, the general fund should be dealing with core matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. And thank you to all of our panelists tonight. It's been, for me, a very informing night, and I've enjoyed sort of the responses you've had to our questions and our audience questions. So I, again, want to thank our audience for being here, either in person or on the live stream. Really, the only way that things are going to get done in this community is people like you that are getting involved, making opinions and hopefully acting on them. So I encourage you, if you're interested in applying to the Roads Management Authority, definitely get out and vote on this issue. If you're already a registered voter, you should have your sample ballots in the mail. And I also want to call special attention to something. Tonight, we didn't do this alone. The Tahoe Regional Young Professionals teamed up with both the Tahoe Chamber and the South Tahoe Chamber of Commerce to host this event, and it's sort of a unique experience in recent years to have all three chambers working together and working to promote the community in a unified manner. And I think that's something that I look forward to promoting and continuing into the future. So if you're a member of one, both, or all of those organizations, expect more from us in the future. And then finally, again, Tahoe Beach Retreat for the location. They are awesome. If you have any other conference needs, they're one of the best games in town. And Tahoe Production House and Brandy and Tim back there for their awesome streaming and video services. And thank you very much. This video will be posted online at our website, TahoeTRYP.org. After this, it usually takes us about a week and a half to get those up. And I look forward to seeing you guys in 2018 for the next Tahoe Town Hall.